Inevitably, this is going to be overexposed. So today I'm going to talk about Narcissus and Goldmund by Hermann Hesse. Hesse, I think. You'd think I'd actually be able to pronounce that like off the top of my whatever. But I don't know why I keep doing that. Force of habit. So yeah, I did have a material physical copy of this, but I ended up giving it to one of my siblings for Christmas because I ended up I feel bad because I ended up kind of forgetting what to give her, and I already had that. So yeah, so I'm gonna have to try to kind of figure out something to do with my hands. But yeah, it's an interesting story. It's probably one of my favorites by Hesse, which is saying something because it is very difficult choice between that and like Steppenwolf. I'd say Steppenwolf is still probably my favorite, and it's like, you know, probably that and like Glassbead Game too. That's like up there as well. And Narcissus and Goldmund kind of Damien is a little bit harder for me to. I'm gonna have to reread that. I did really, obviously, I really enjoy it. It was a lot more kind of abstruse, arcane, like very. Especially abstract, even for Hesse. You know, I think I was like, that was probably one of the more on its face, overtly Jungian ones, whereas these ones are a little bit hard. You know, well, Narcissus and Goldmund's very Jungian, which I'm going to discuss into the book. But yeah, so I don't think I really need to give more of a background. I believe I did in some of my other videos. If you want to hear a little bit more background on Hesse, you know, he was born in 1877, I believe, and passed away in 1962. So yeah, he saw a lot. You know, I believe he was expressly like anti-war, or especially anti-German kind of, you know, in the similar way that Thomas Mann was. And they both, you know, kind of fled, and he was so much they said that he was actually, you know, if you look him up, he actually is considered Swiss German rather than just German, even though he had, you know, German family and all that. He was, you know, like a very, you know, that's where Steppenwolf, because he was a man of the steppes, you know, he was very taken away, you know, with this kind of wandering spirit, I guess, to him. He was a painter, too. In fact, I guess you could argue that he was first and foremost a poet and I'm not sure when he got into painting, but I think, you know, there's a very beautiful documentary about Hermann Hesse. It came out in the 60s, I think it was. Or at least, I don't know, it might have come out semi-recently, but just had a lot of archive footage. Because luckily they were able to get, you know, his family kind of heirloom, I guess they had cameras at the time. And luckily we have, just like we do with Carl Jung, we have, you know, a good face-to-face. Well, not a face-to-face with Hesse, but, you know, we do have one with Jung. That I think I had some British gentleman sat down with him, and there was like a good 3-hour conversation. I think it's not available online. That's from my understanding. But I don't know if there's any. We do have footage of Hesse painting though, and it's I just think it's a very beautiful. I forget the name of it, but if I remember it, I'll link it in the description. So yeah. So anyway, going to the novel. The novel is set in medieval times. It doesn't give an exact date. Kind of like what he does with some of his other novels, like Glassbead Game kind of does a similar thing, but Glassbead Games takes place in the future, but it's like kind of a vague kind of like a few hundred years in the future, but it doesn't give like an exact time frame. It's kind of, you know, detached. And that same thing goes with this. It's like, it's kind of like, it could be anywhere between 900 BC, or I'm sorry, not, you know, 900 AD to like 1300, probably. But it does give, it mentions the Black Plague a couple times. Or, there's a good point of view. Forgive me, it's been like 3 years since I've read the novel. But they do mention the Black Plague quite a bit, like towards the middle, like kind of rising action, I guess, the second act of the plot. And then, so yeah, that kind of gives you an idea a little bit when it takes place. And there's also, just on that note too, there's like some really beautiful fairy tales that Hermann Hesse, that's actually narrated by Donovan on the Audible one that I really liked. And he has like a really nice kind of narrative voice too, in addition to obviously having a really nice singing voice. I just thought I should point that out, kind of advertising for that. But yeah, that I just bring that up because it's a similar thing with that too. Like the fairy tales kind of remind me. It's a little bit of a fable with this too, because though it takes place, like Steppenwolf has like a distinctly 20s aspect. It has like the roaring 20s, or in the 30s, I should say. Like it's hearkening to the 20s in the sense that there's a lot of like the jazz and like the the improv and the heart, with, especially with the Pablo, the saxophone player, and he's like, they're so, everybody's so like kind of that kind of 20s spirit going into the 30s, I suppose, because it's like I suppose that's when it was released, and which is funny because Narcissus and Goldmund was also not released too far after that, but I think it was released in 1930. I should have now remember. But it takes place, like I said, it's kind of like it's a little bit like up in the air. But it's about these two monks, Narcissus and Goldmund, obviously. Narcissus, obviously, meaning the titular myth of Narcissus in Greek mythology, of the young man who becomes very obsessed with their looks, so much to the extent that they can't stop looking at their own reflection. So to the extent that like everything else pales in comparison, and they fall in love with their own reflection. So it's like that's where the Greek root word Narcissus comes from, or that's where the modern usage of the today's word comes from the Greek word Narcissus, whereas like and I guess in the German sense at some point there was like a actually as far back as like the late 90s, I think, the German language got like not like a redux, but like kind of a little bit of like a tweaking, and they kind of tweaked it. So I think like the German pronunciation is like Narcissus or something like, or Narcissus. So I don't know if that fits quite, Hesse's German of the, because he wrote it in German, my imagining, and that was his native language and all that. So, he was just a very, Swiss, by kind of temperament maybe, but he had Narcissus, there's staying at this cloister, Catholic cloister to be exact, and he is this very heady, intellectual, very studious, and when I first heard like Narcissus, like when I heard, knowing what little I did of that myth, I thought like what was gonna happen was that Narcissus was gonna be the character that was like obsessed with his own looks, or like he was going to be a narcissistic and vain and egotistical, and that was kind of my thought going into it. And then I realized like, oh well, it's actually in more so of an intellectual sense, because he's not like obsessed with image or status or he's not obsessed with his own looks per se, but he is definitely very zeroing in. He's like focused on his own studies, and like he's such a scholar and an academic to the point where everything else, like kind of like the outside world, like everything outside of the cloister kind of doesn't register with him. Like he's like not really aware of what's going on. And then Goldmund, on the other hand, is this very free-spirited, artistic leaning young man who's a few years younger. Than they bond because they're close in age, and Narcissus mentors him in all things like of the intellect and furrowing, and in a since it's a religious cloister, obviously they have it's studying theology is a big thing, and showing that in those days maybe it was Narcissus would have been kind of like a lay theologian, maybe not lay, but like a theologian, kind of a Thomas Aquinas kind of philosopher / theologian, and he's very heady, and things he's very oriented towards those things, whereas Goldmund is like a very restless free spirit. He's wandering. He's you can't like put him on a leash. You can't like control what Goldmund does, because like it changes from one day to the next. He's like very spur of the moment, and just like and that kind of shows right away in the book, like even when he's young. And then basically there's a point when Goldmund realizes that this life of like the monastic, being sequestered in this little area is like not for him. So he decides to actually run away. And he does this on a whim at first, not really knowing that he's gonna soon be like this kind of like wander, like not really, just like not even like looking behind him, just looking back at the cloister and that upbringing he had. But like he just does it out of like an impulse on like for just a night, and then he falls in love with this one girl, like a maid, like I think a farm girl, and then he realizes like like his heart belongs like in the in the wandering kind of drifting aspect of life rather than being confined to the cloister. So he like decides to run away, and he also is kind of like maybe fearful of like the punitive measures that they might take on him. So he runs away with this young girl, and then that kind of love fades. But this is kind of the arc to his life. Like he kind of Goldmund from this then on in the novel kind of comes into his own, realizing that he cannot be beholden to just one thing. Like he's like, oh, I've got to do this, and his life is kind of like, whereas Narcissus' life is like a flat arc. And that's not bad. I'm not saying there's anything bad about this. That's just the way they are, and that's kind of what the novel is trying to point out. Hesse, what makes him so such a lovely book, in my opinion, is that it's not preaching that Narcissus's way of living is the way to go. It's not saying with like a it's not giving a normative, you ought to live, this is the Platonic ideal that you should strive for, Narcissus is the way to go. Nor is it saying that Goldmund's the way to go either. It's not saying, yeah, Goldmund going out and, kind of being a little bit promiscuous, like having loves and relationships and flowering and blossoming in his art, doing his artistic thing and sculpting. He falls in love with sculpting somewhere in the novel too. That's the way to go. It's not saying that either. It's just total detached, just saying this is like the way two people, like two very good friends, and how they blossom and they grow and they come to their understanding, and they in the Jungian term of individuation, like their way of developing and growing and actualizing themselves is very different. But like that doesn't mean that it's that that it's sinful or wrong for either of them, which I'll get into later on. But so yeah, Narcissus stays obviously with the cloister, and he kind of fosters and he continues to teach, and he becomes like he climbs ladders up, but only of that little small area of the hamlet that he comes from. Like but he's still very much devoted to the cloister, and he's whereas Goldmund goes on kind of a long kind of drifting marathon of just he'll like. At one point, he's falls in love with sculpting after, I think, like being not commissioned, but maybe asked by like a church, I think, to like just sculpt some like religious icon. I think of like Mother Mary, I think, or maybe the Madonna and the Child or something. Just very well-known iconography, and bringing that to life. And he's able to do that with his hands. He's just able to. Goldmund realizes that when he puts his like mentality to it, and he's like he clamps down. He's actually able to do very beautiful, like beautifying, venerating, and like holy, sacrosanct things. Like he's actually capable of that kind of expression, and he's like when he's kind of disrupted, and he's like he's led by his this is maybe where it goes a little bit into the kind of like, well, maybe Goldmund ought to do this. That's where it's tempting to do that, but I'm not going to try to fall for the trap of saying he should have not do that. But he does get, like he does. Like there are times when you're like begging for Goldmund not to do certain things, and he'll just go ahead and do it. It's just like things that aren't wise for him. Like he's like not really having foresight. Like he's like what are you thinking? Like especially maybe for somebody like me, where I'm more kind of like I'm more naturally akin to Narcissus in that respect. Like I'm kind of like. I'm kind of more comfortable in kind of my home space, or like being or nurturing the intellect and like reading and doing these things and like solitary activities. That's very much my avenue, I guess, believe it or not. Whereas like Goldmund, like it's tempting for me to say like Goldmund shouldn't do that, but at the same time, there's so many people I've known and crossed paths with, good friends too, or that I've befriended over the years that have maybe a temperament more akin to Goldmund, and I've seen times when I've maybe been quick to judge or quick to. I know it's a cliche that's been tiresome, old, tedious one, but it's the judge not less be you can judge. But I think there's some a lot of truth in that. This sense of not being too quick to jump to conclusions about other people's personalities and what makes them tick and why they act certain ways, because there is a deep well of complexity within all of us. As much as I say I might be more of an intellectual, homebody, there's a part of me that does want to travel and to do this and to do that, and I'm not defined by just one strict trait. There's so many different things, which is why I love Steppenwolf so much too, is because he talks about Harry Haller having a wide multitude of personalities. Not just the Steppenwolf and not just the Harry Haller kind of, at odds with the bourgeoisie, in the 1920s. But there's also, Goldmund spends a lot of time trying to figure out what that is. Why is he the way he is? And he has to kind of go out and actually experience the world in order to figure that out. And that's where he feels most at home. Whereas in the cloister, he would actually have been, he would have been stifled. He would have not been able to fully come into his own and figure out what these things are. He's the type of personality that's so restless and free-spirited that he needs to go out and physically be what am I doing? That kind of thing. Whereas Narcissus is the opposite, obviously. He's Narcissus needs to be in a place on his own, slowly feeding and distending kind of his his academic interest and kind of growing himself on his singular terms with his small little community of people. That's where he feels at most at home. So yeah, plot wise, the second act with kind of when he Goldmund realizes that the cloister isn't for him. Let's get realized arranged. Realizes the cloister isn't for him. He moves. It's kind of like a back and forth type of thing. He ends up kind of fall in love with another person too after that other farm girl, and basically the Black Plague is at this point it ravages all of Europe basically, and this is the one part that's the historical part that you can kind of cling on to and kind of ascertain okay, this is what's going on now. We're in this time period of history, and there's a lot of different really just horrible things going on, just not only the Black Plague, kind of this widespread death of life expectancy is obviously rapidly short, ephemeral. It's just everything is just kind of falling apart for Goldmund at this point, and he's just taking refuge with this. This is the point when it's kind of these seasons in life, and this is the one that just brings destitution and a bleak terror for Goldmund, and he's not sure what to do. He's just just surviving, just getting by, and I think this is very necessary because at first when I read it, because it felt a little bit irrelevant, you didn't really need to okay, why are we hearing about these part yes, we get it, there's seasons when things go awry. But it's more than that. I think the reason Hesse brings it up is because I think it's showing that there's a part of us there's a unifying thing, outer external events that are outside of our control that none of us can. It's almost like a stoical kind of sentiment of there's things that we just have to Albert Camus' The Plague, which I have right here. I don't know why I need to show it. I mean, just to prove that. But yeah, he's where this something inexplicably outside of everybody's control becomes the status quo. It's you just have to deal with it, and that's kind of the main driving point of that story. But like also of kind of Narcissus and Goldmund is that regardless of how different they are, there's this unifying thing, like this that kind of brings us all together, and that's the thing we've seen maybe with COVID too. Not to be too like kind of milking that for all it's worth, maybe, but like it's like it kind of brought us together in a sense that like everybody was all in on it. Everybody was kind of there for each other. Everybody kind of you don't need to like. It's kind of something instinctual of like people, like we have kind of a hive mentality of like no matter how much we try to say like, oh, like maybe I'm this way or that way, it's like like the whole cliche, but like it's kind of resonates too, because it's like I think with Narcissus and Goldmund, like there's this like he's Goldmund's wrestling with the world and trying to figure out like how to best figure, and there's a time when like a guild actually actually contacts him and says like, yeah, like we think you're really talented and we could actually use you, but you'd actually have to kind of put away your wild ways and your drifting ways, and you'd have to kind of like anchor yourself to this guild, and like Goldmund says no, like he's like refuses it because he's so like his spirit is so aimless in nature that he can't like just like put an anchor on it. So finally, I am skipping some pretty heavy details probably, but towards the end, obviously spoilers, Narcissus and Goldmund come to meet each other once again by happenstance when Goldmund is with like a city councilor, like a city governor, I think, ends up having an affair with the city governor's wife, I believe, and is like on the condemned for infidelity, and especially in these days, like that would have been kind of like the like kind of the nail in the coffin for anybody, like so like Goldmund's kind of caught in this like very at the end of his ropes kind of situation, like just like everything seems to be over for him, and then out of nowhere Narcissus arrives. I believe like maybe it was because I'm not sure like if by chance Narcissus showed up, or it was by like he knew maybe kind of in advance, like he had some foresight into what was going on with Goldmund and that he would have been there, but but whatever it was, like they both showed up in their old age, kind of old age, I suppose, and yeah, Narcissus ends up exonerating him and getting saving his neck, and basically they they catch up, and they're like they embrace, and they're like they tell each other everything about like kind of like what went on, and they have a long talk, and they kind of like they're different kind of, they monologue a lot on kind of maybe the critical side in me might want to say like wax poetic, but it's so beautiful, like I don't really care if it like it sounds sentimental, but like I think it's just so like a wonderful thought of how both of them kind of like they differ in their personalities, and like one of them is like meant to be meant to be solitary and standing by their home cloister and localized parochial, and then another one of them is like a restless spirit that's that when he puts his hands to good use, and when he actually reins it in and is able to kind of control his impulses, he's actually able to do something very beautiful. So what happens in like this very final episode is that I guess we call it falling action, maybe third act, is that Narcissus basically teaches Goldmund, and he's like, I'll help you, like old times, like kind of like rein in that last final bit, because like we're reaching old age, you might not be able to, and I think like you might actually really create something beautiful with our church. So they go back to the cloister, and like Narcissus kind of guides his old friend, and it's a very beautiful sentiment. It's just like like them, they like not once does Narcissus say like you were in the wrong. You shouldn't have run for the cloister. Like he just like is like totally accepting, and not once does Goldmund say like you're such a stupid idiot for living your life inside this like monastery. But like they both they set aside those kind of differences, and they see like the true potential in one another, and that's why that's why I one of my favorites probably. Yeah. So yeah. I think it ends on the fact that obviously they both die, but they both die at peace. Like they finally, that kind of Jungian process of individuation is finally kind of absolved. Like it's like like the kind of the directions of like Goldmund, the sundry different lives that he lived, like as a lover, as an artist, as this and that, and kind of like Goldmund in his full arc was kind of, he needed like it was another thing too, like twofold too, because he kind of needed Goldmund too, in the sense that he was not at his best when he was in the monk, like in that monk solitary lifestyle. He was always like every day, like he thought of, like he said, like in the novel, he was like every day I thought of you, Goldmund, like I couldn't get you out of my mind, like you just, and he really did need him, to kind of fructify, or to bring to fruition that kind of ideal of his, like because it shows that like the study type, like they're and I can identify as that they're truly like they actually need other people, like they really do, like they do need some other positive, like external warm source of like any like of a friend or a comrade or a peer or a teacher. They really do need that kind of force to kind of guide them out too, because it might seem like they have all the answers, like the wise sages and of society too. But they need just as much as the Goldmund society of the world needed as well. So I think that was also a very wonderful sentiment. So yeah, there is my kind of rambling review with probably a lot of different errors and probably a lot of imperfections, but hey, I'm just gonna roll with it. So yeah, Narcissus and Goldmund by Hermann Hesse. Check it out. Definitely recommend it. Let me know what you think.